when they were doing the CEDAR program back in 78, 79. So my organization, Asian American Art Center, which has been around since 74 and is still operating to a certain extent, came out of this building. So I think it is important that the building serve its cultural function through the nonprofits that are there, but also through the cultural facilities that would.
Sorry, I think, did it unmute you?
Did you hear me or no?
I think we missed the last sentence.
The last sentence?
Mm-hmm.
So that the building, if it's known as a cultural facility, including the nonprofits that are there, and that the facilities for various kinds of cultural events are built into the building. And so people know that they can come to the building for various activities, whether it's a theater or dance floor or black box or gallery or these kinds of facilities that Chinatown doesn't really have on a certain scale, would be important to be built into the building.
And what do you think the residents would be proud of, if you were to sum this up as an aspiration?
I use the term Asian American.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that term came out of a particular period of time, and how that term may continue, or
Mm-hmm.
how it revises or changes. But I think that the Asian American movement, which is about 69, 70 on the East Coast, developed a generation of of many nonprofits, which developed this term, Asian American, particularly for the Census Bureau, so that we would be counted, and many social service organizations use that term.
Mm-hmm.
So the development of an Asian American consciousness and to sort of update Chinatown as a place to go eat,
Mm-hmm.
but for the community, the Chinese population, but much more beyond that, the Asian American population, that this is a place for us. This is the place where that consciousness is evolving and growing and flourishing and is accepted in the larger city. So that before, when the city did not really embrace,
Mm-hmm.
and had many mayors that tried to move Chinatown off this land close to Wall Street,
Mm-hmm.
trying to get the city to, and the neighborhood, NoHo, Soho, Little Italy, were all opposed to and did not ever invite the Chinese community to participate in, say, lower Manhattan-wide cultural activities.
Mm-hmm.
And I've experienced that.
Mm-hmm.
So that, and we have maps that exclude Chinatown, which show the other areas of the city participating in certain kinds of events. So it's important that, contrary to the anti-Asian violence that's going on, that there is a welcoming, a development of welcoming for the
Mm-hmm.
Chinese community, the Asian American community, to participate in the larger city,
Mm-hmm.
and for this community itself to become more of an advocate, like an advocate of MoCA, more of an advocate for its cultural visibility and presence.
Mm-hmm.
Is that clear, or?
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Who wants to go next? I did mute all of you during the presentation, so you would want to unmute yourself to speak. Veera just joined. Veera, just for you, we're going through the first activity, and through two sentences, what we're trying to understand is what the aspiration for 70 Mulberry Street could be. So if you want to participate in that. Rocky, if you want to speak. Dan.
Sure. Hi. It's good to see some of my friends on this call. I'm actually juggling a community board meeting, would you believe? This is the life we live in Zoom, right? So apologies, but I think I can do it. I don't have any, everybody's spoken pretty, I guess I wrote out the first one. In 2030, 70 Mulberry Street is known for being a robust hub of community activity and where residents, visitors, workers can discover what is happening and where to unlock the wonderful offerings of this historic and vibrant community. That's pretty long, but anyway.
When you say unlock the, what did you say? Unlock the?
Unlock the wonderful offerings of this historic and vibrant community.
And when you say offerings of this historic, vibrant community, would you want to elaborate on that?
Well, obviously I'm just responding a little bit off the cuff here, so.
It's okay, no pressure, no pressure.
2030 is in the future, not that far away, but I think Chinatown is evolving, so I wanted to kind of link together it's historic as well as vibrant, because it's aspirational and it will continue. Historically, it's a very important role in terms of the Chinese in America, and I think in the future it will continue to play a role. It may be different. So pretty much, and then when I said wonderful offerings, I just think, even though I live close to Chinatown, I live in the Lower East Side, I do go there, and I have a lot of friends who live there and also who go there, and I'm always finding that we are discovering new things, new things. Sometimes it's old things. So this particular building itself, I should just point out, one of the good friends of my aunt who lived on Long Island told me fairly late in life, before she passed away, she was the first Chinese teacher in the public school. And her daughter is a children's book author. So I said, well, hey, you should jump onto this envisioning, this visioning process. But I got her to kind of think about also like how her family relates to the building, even though they don't live there. A lot of them are artists. A lot of them are doing very interesting civic work. So I think that building, although it obviously is not its former self, hopefully will rise up and still be there. And that's all I have to say there, I guess. The second one is just Chinatown, we're proud because this is a building that is Historically, geographically, you know, close to the heart of Chinatown or in the heart of Chinatown. Oftentimes we forget that. Who knows what Chinatown's going to be like in the future? When I first got involved, Chinatown was really below, Bob knows this, you know, below Canal Street, you know, it kind of jumped. It's already like probably even closer to 14th Street. It's, you know, it's kind of also been affected by gentrification and so forth. So anyway, that's pretty much all I need to say right now. And thank you for facilitating this.
Not at all. Thank you. Dan, would you want to go next? Vera? Oh, Dan, you there? Okay. I think you still might be, we can't hear you. We can't hear you, sorry. You're not on mute. It seems that there might be a problem with your audio.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, definitely. Great.
Okay, great. All right, sorry I was late to the meeting, I had some technical difficulties. So I sort of missed, is there an opening question in terms of,
Yes.
I know we're talking about 70 Mulberry Street.
Yes, yes. So the first activity is focused on the aspirations that you might have for 70 Mulberry Street. And we have a sentence to guide you to answer that. In 2030, 70 Mulberry Street is known for, if you want to fill in that blank. And in 2030, Chinatown residents are proud of 70 Mulberry Street because.
Okay. All right, in 2030, 70, so I'm going to fill in the blank with what my vision for what 70 Mulberry Street will be known for in the year 2030, which is 10 years from now.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so I'm hoping for 70 Mulberry Street to be the tallest building in the Chinatown neighborhood. Hopefully that property would be able to service all the needs that the community needs. Like community I feel since I've been born and raised in the Chinatown area, I know for a fact that Chinatown needs more parking spaces. It definitely needs some type of like a concert hall where children in the neighborhood can perform their recitals, enroll in classes for dance, culture, music, and be like the mecca or the epicenter for how we could educate the future generations in terms of Chinese culture and the history of Chinatown.
But if you were to take these needs and sum them up in 2 or 3 words that could be more aspirational, what would that be? As a vision, what would you want?
Okay. In 2030, 70 Mulberry Street will be known for being a hub for the Chinese community to congregate, to further Chinese culture. And in 2030, Chinatown residents are proud of 70 Mulberry Street because it's been a successful venue for providing a venue for everyone to gather to further educate themselves in Chinese culture and the history of Chinatown.
Great, thank you. Linsing Association, I think it's Kelly Tang, right?
Yes.
Would you want to go next?
In 2030, Mulberry Street is known for a place that or community, like different community association, like they can have their use as a community center for all different like ethnic group.
Mm-hmm.
So in 2030, China.
Mm-hmm. In 2030, 70 Mulberry Street is known for?
Out of 70 Mulberry Street because, and this is it's still like new, and then like a well known, and then like multi-use community center that which can like benefit a lot of residents in Chinatown.
Mm-hmm. And then what do you think the residents would be proud of? Or what would be the residents proud of in 70 Mulberry Street?
Because the building will be like multi-use, can be like a combination of culture, art, and then also not-profit organizations to help provide different community service to the residents in Chinatown.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Frank, would you want to go next?
Are you referring to me?
Yes.
No, I was at another group and I somehow got dropped out and I signed back in and I came here. I'm in the middle of this.
Are you a property owner or a small business? I
Yeah.
can assign you to the other group if you want.
I was at property, but then my phone dropped out and when I called back in, I got into this group.
Uh-huh.
So I'm like in between both.
No worries. You can speak here or I can assign you
Right.
to the property owner.
So basically what you, in 2030, you want to know what 70 Mulberry Street is known for?
According to you, yes.
I would think more for like a community cultural center.
Mm-hmm.
And basically what is being used for now, with a little maybe expansion to bring in more as a cultural center, so visitors can come in to enjoy what's offered.
Mm-hmm.
Chinatown needs a lot of foot traffic, and that would probably benefit the merchants and the retail and everything besides getting some cultural and heritage out of for the community, for the outside.
Mm-hmm.
What Chinatown residents are proud of? And I missed the what resident.
According to you, in 2030, what would be the residents, Chinatown community or residents? Why would they feel proud of 70 Mulberry Street? Like if you had to sum it up in 1 or 2 words. You know?
I would think that about the heritage of the Chinese residents.
Mm-hmm.
I guess because it is a basically Chinese community, Asian,
Mm-hmm.
to bring awareness to the culture, I guess. Maybe I guess I came a little late and
Sounds good. Mm-hmm.
yeah, more for the the families and those who living in Chinatown, there is a heritage that they want to be proud of.
Mm-hmm.
Continue that, I guess. Yeah.
Thank you. Vera, you haven't spoken. Would you want to speak?
Hi, yes. Hi, everyone. I think everyone's basically said it all.
Mm-hmm.
In 2030, 70 Mulberry Street, for me, is known for being a performing arts center that features dance, drama, opera, all sorts of different performing arts that that people from all over the world actually would want to come and see.
Mm-hmm.
And that in 2030, Chinatown residents are proud of 70 Mulberry Street because of its excellence in all of its programming and the performing arts centers that it puts, and performing arts that it actually puts out.
Great. I think we have one more person left. Lin Singh. Kelly, did you speak?
Yes, I already make the remark. Yeah.
All right, great. So I'll move to the next activity. We know that there are different thoughts about this building. Some people want to fully preserve it. Some people want to fully demolish it. And the idea here is not to show the two polarities, but to understand where people are in the middle of it. And so according to you, on a scale of 1 to 5, where do you think you would put your vote? And why is that important to you? And what do you see the advantages and disadvantages or trade-offs of your suggested approach? Eva, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I would love to. Thank you. I should tell folks who I don't know in the group that my family has lived continuously in Chinatown for over 100 years. And that when my family fled the violence on the West Coast, the anti-Chinese violence, we found a refuge in New York's Chinatown. And when the first generation of folks from my family were born in the community, where they went to school was at PS 23. It was known as the Columbus School at the time. And it was the building that was at the side of 70 Mulberry Street. It is where my family learned to speak English. It is where we learned about American values and social mores. And so it really was that, and the church really were our introductions to American society. And so for me, the building and for my family has great historical value. And I also want to say that, you know, Chinatown is one of the last unaltered heritage neighborhoods in the city. And so it's really important to maintain that architectural integrity. And as a lifelong New Yorker, I don't want to see what happened to the old Penn Station to happen to this historic building, which sits in the heart of Chinatown. Fei Chu Matsuda, who was the former director of MoCA, called the building an historic, I'm quoting her, an artifact itself meriting historic preservation. So the reason why MoCA continued to stay there and have its archives there was because MoCA recognized that the building was significant. Alumni association, alumni reunions happened there that my grandparents took part in. And in these alumni reunions of you know, former students of PS 23, the museum was able to gather artifacts and stories for which they were able to build their permanent collection and future exhibits. So I think that, you know, it's important to think about how important this building has been. And in fact, there is a cultural and historic legacy that's embedded in the bones of the foundation of this building. And we need to keep the foundation and what remains and build up from there. In January 28th, 5 days after the fire, Balfour Davis, who is a supervising demolition inspector for HPD, said, and I'm quoting him from the South China Morning Post, "Private contractors will take down freestanding walls out, but the building itself is sound." So I'm just gonna repeat, the building itself is sound. And so because of that, I think that it's incredibly important to continue with the preservation of the building. And also in terms of like foot traffic and commerce, you know, it's so important to the vibrancy of Chinatown. We've got so many tourists and so many tour groups that walk through the streets and they purchase things, right? And they buy things from, you know, our small business owners. And what they're looking for is an authentic Chinatown experience. And part of what they can get by seeing this building, if we have a preservation, right, that works in alignment with the new building, whatever kind of building that we, you know, what the city puts up after, if we have both working together, these kinds of tourists, right, are going to be able to have that authentic experience. Plus, all the folks in the neighborhood and the generations of Chinese Americans after can also walk down the street and their grandparents can say, look, that's the school where that's the place where I went to school. You know, now it's an amazing facility, a modern facility inside that houses all of these great nonprofits that help us. So if you want to know what I would vote for, it would be for number one, full preservation.
And so not just the intangible, but also the tangible. Like in terms of the building, would you want to also preserve all the building elements? So say the stone base, the brick wall, or is it the legacy that you want to preserve?
I want to preserve the building, what remains.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the foundation, the exterior walls, what remains from the city's demolition.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because I think that it helps to maintain the architectural integrity of the neighborhood and of the landscape. When people are walking through the streets, they can look up and see a building that is still in keeping with the neighborhood, with the cultural and architectural elements of the neighborhood.
Mm-hmm. Who would want to speak next? Robert?
Oh, you're asking me?
Would you want to go next?
Okay, I can say also that we're, actually, I think I'm not clear on when you say the look of the building or the stone base. The architectural integrity involves certain elements that you're implying are not visible. And that those elements, could we decide that they're not essential because we're just interested in the way the building looks to people walking by? Can you clarify that?
I would say, yes, the slide is speaking more structurally to the physical, but I would redirect the question and say it's not just about the building, the physicality of it. And as Eva pointed out, it's also about all the stories and the legacy and the values that come with the building, and that warranties equal preservation, right? And being able to restore that too. But I would ask you, what is it that you want to preserve?
That's my question. When you say the stone base, which is not visible, or some other elements which I'm not clear on what those elements are, if they're not visible to people walking by, they might have some other value that perhaps Ava knows about or you know about, and that I'm not clear on.
Mm-hmm.
I think the stone base has something to do with having talked to the architect,
Mm-hmm.
the way it connects to the sidewalk, the way that the building is structured, where does the weight go? If you put up a new building, the weight has to be redistributed, which is very, very expensive. So I know a little bit about the stone base, but I'm not sure if there are other elements that you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. I mean, there are a lot of elements. What people have been advocating for is the stone masonry, the brick wall, and the staircase more so. But then there are people who might not be aware of it, and that they are speaking more to the stories and the cultural connection that they have to the building. And
You said something about stakeis. What is stakeis?
so if I show you do you look at this is the staircase, this is the stone wall, right? The masonry wall. And that's the brick shell. The brick shell now is only up till the first floor, right? Because the other 3 floors were burned, they caught fire, right? So there are all these architectural elements. What I want to understand, what is it that you want to preserve?
Well, all of the things
To your
that
knowledge.
all the things that you're pointing to are visible.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, I think that's everything that Ava is talking about. We want to preserve the look of the building. The only thing that is not visible is the stone base, which I understand from the architect that it is crucial to the building and to preserving, unless you're changing something very, very fundamental, it would be prohibitive because it would be too expensive to be something that is weight bearing. You keep the stone base as it is now because it does not only weight bearing, but it also does something else in terms of, I'm not sure, something connected to the sidewalk and the rest of the area in which the building is there. So I guess therefore that I would be in the same position. That is number one, you want to keep all the other social issues, questions, so that the building retains a connection to all the people who have memories of it. And in that sense, I wish the 3rd floor could be replaced, because I think that would add to the historical presence of the building. But I don't know if that's possible. So in any case, I'm in I guess the area of number 1. And I think that you have a drawing of someone the architect that I mentioned, who has proposed, or think Chinatown has proposed, putting up a 3-story area above the 6th floor, which is set back so that the look of the building remains the same, but you have 3 extra floors, which double the square footage, on the top of the roof of the building. So that preserves the look of the building and keeps the character of Chinatown and doesn't block any shadows on the street.
Do you want to go
Bianca?
Yes. I can't see
I'm
your name.
sorry. I wasn't sure if Robert was finished with his statement.
Yeah, I am.
Okay. my question is, right now I'm on the fence in terms of which direction 70 Mulberry Street would be headed into. Now, if we try to preserve whatever remains of 70 Mulberry Street, now, my guess is that that's going to lengthen the project of actually the restoration and building out the new sections of 70 Mulberry Street. Is that safe to assume, or?
Are you asking me?
Yes.
I would not be able, and my role here is to listen to you. I don't think I can
Okay,
tell
you're here to moderate.
Yes, I cannot tell you
Okay.
with different scenarios. That requires a technical person to really go in depth and see what exactly is being preserved. That requires a preservation assessment. And
Okay. I mean, you know, I was just curious in terms of, like, you know, in my terms of logic, it just seems that if we were to level the 70 Mulberry Street, which is a major if, I would presume that by starting building it out from the ground up, instead of having to deal with existing infrastructure that's there, that we would be able to expedite the process of rebuilding 70 Mulberry Street. That was just my question. My major concern is that the longer that we wait for to start the process of rebuilding 70 Mulberry Street, I hope that the question that you wanted us to answer, like in 2030, that this property would even already be erected and fully functional. So that's my major concern, because as everyone can see now when you're walking around Chinatown, it's like almost like a ghost town, because many businesses cannot survive due to this pandemic and the current economics of New York City. So I just feel that the longer we delay the project, it's just going to be detrimental for everyone in the neighborhood.
mm-hmm.
And my other question for you is, how many different groups are different rooms are, because I heard Frank saying that he was in the property owners group. Because I manage a property in Chinatown, so I don't know if I'm supposed to be in you know, put in that group, or and what group is this considered to be?
This is the community industry stakeholder group, but like, we don't like to draw strict lines. We try putting people with same interest in the same group, but like, this is a community conversation in a community, right? I think we all are, and it's actually better to have people with different interests in one room, but it's up to you.
Okay. Okay. Got it.
Yeah.
So how many different groups are
today we are moderating.
Right now?
Today we are moderating 3 different groups.
3 different groups. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Vera, would you want to go next?
Well, thanks, Ava. I just saw your commentary there.
Yeah. I listened to Dan and Ava, and I hear what both are saying. I am in the bucket of preservation, so more towards one. I've always felt that the building, you know, in its form prior to it being partially demolished even, really is a beautiful building that stands out in Chinatown. And when you hear what Ava speaks about, you know, there's so much, there's also an emotional connection to the brick and mortar. So the facade and all of that seems to be very contextual in terms of our neighborhood. And I would like to see that, if it can be done, to be preserved. And then agreeing with Dan, which is there's a lot of businesses that are suffering right now. So if this can be done in a expeditious way, that would not cause any more harm in terms of the construction impacts and all that with the rest of the neighborhood. That would be, you know, the preference. And I cannot speak as to the structure and the interior and all that. That is not within my expertise, but, you know, to be able to have a building that has historic significance maintained and kept, I think would be valuable to Chinatown.
So you're saying retain the emotional connection, but also be considerate of the time.
Sorry, I'm sorry, I didn't hear that last part.
You said something about time as well, right?
Sorry, about what? I'm sorry, I could not hear that.
So you said retain there is an emotional connection to brick and mortar. Can you hear me?
Yes, now I
I
can.
can hear you. We hear you loud and clear.
All right, okay. So you said there is an emotional connection to brick and mortar, and that should be considered. But
yes.
Yeah, okay. Who wants to go next?
I was originally in another group, but I left my cell phone and went onto my desktop. I think, should I go back to the other group or should I stay in this group?
I'll assign you to the.
Yeah, I was back in it was like a small business owner. There was Susan in there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So it's Kelly again from Lincoln Association. And then I recently just upload a joint statement regarding the rebuilding of 70 Mulberry Street, which is co-signed by our organization and CCBA and the other 6 key traditional associations in Chinatown that we all exist and established over a century ago. So the main 2 directions that regarding to rebuilding of 70 Mulberry Street is whether we want to rebuild or restore, right? So the mayor de Blasio gave a 80 million budget to on this on rebuild the 70 Mulberry Street. It is a lot of money. So we really should make some calculation on like if we want to both preservation of the 70 Mulberry, how much gonna be, and we want to rebuild the building and how much be. If the amount of the money is very close, why don't we like have a rebuild and have a brand new and also you know a more facility building with more like for more like multi-use, not just for the 5 5 organizations who are exist at the Mulberry Street, but we can have provide more service and more useful in the community. You know.
Mm-hmm.
So people who are interested can take a look at the statement I just upload. If they have any question, feel free to to contact Lincoln Association or CCBA.
Mm-hmm. So you're advocating for a multi-purpose space.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Rocky, would you want to speak? I know you're juggling 2 meetings.
Sure. It's hard to, I mean, I would put myself in one, but I think, you're getting into the weeds of like trade-offs sometimes when you have expertise. I'm not, I think we want to preserve the legacy, the look and so forth. But we also have talked before about the kind of place we want it to be. And I just don't want to counterpose, there may be some need to do that flexibility. I don't think that means it means tearing it down. Okay, so I'm definitely not tearing it down. But for example, I've been involved in some landmarks issues. For example, getting the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory memorial in NYU, and sometimes people get really caught up in it in a way that kind of loses the picture. whole picture. So that's all I have to say really is, you know, I think people have already mentioned about the iconic nature of the legacy of the building. So I think there are things that you wouldn't want to see. You know, if you tore it down, obviously that would be extreme. On the other hand, people have said, you know, this might be an opportunity to have a different kind of space internally that doesn't exist because we didn't have an elevator. Well, you know, maybe there could be some kind of multi-purpose or auditorium, a small auditorium or something. So you know, I think I'll just leave it at that. I guess, you know, if folks want to build really a tall building, you'd have to deal with zoning changes. So I don't see that as something that I would think would be something we should talk about. There's big issues about zoning in Chinatown and so forth. So I think the scale of the building still should be pretty much the same. I should mention that before the fire, a lot of us in the arts community and working in a group called Create had looked at the building as a opportunity to maybe get more usable space. Bob knows this because we were talking about it. You know, that it's an old building, so the previous use was not necessarily the maximum use of the space. So now that that space is totally, you know, gutted and so forth, it seems to me that there could be some obviously other kind of uses. I would not necessarily be opposed to some design that may be slightly different. So anyway, that's all I have to say right now.
That's actually a nice segment, and I can go through all the 4 prompts if you want to speak to all of them together. Eva, I see you're struggling to hear. Can you hear me?
I can now, thanks.
Okay. So what we're really trying to do in this activity, and understand it's the conversation to make the conversation more fluid. We are talking about full preservation, full demolition scenario. We're also talking about adaptive reuse, or thinking about how the interior of the building could be a new space planning. We're talking about height and number of floors and zoning issues. And then we're talking about programming, right? So if you want the conversation to be more fluid, I can easily move between these 4 slides, and would open the floor again to understand where you are in terms of these 2 things. Dan?
Hi, Priyanka. I think like before people make the final decision in terms of what they want to do and how they want to proceed with 70 Mulberry Street, maybe we can actually, you know the facts. Like for instance, the time frame in terms of rebuilding and restoring 70 Mulberry Street. Should we proceed with the preservation aspect of the 70 Mulberry Street? And I would like to also know like the time frame, the cost, and the same for either direction that 70 Mulberry Street heads in. Because like for instance, if the costs are prohibitive for doing a full preservation, maybe we can work together with people that want to have it totally gutted and total rebuild to find some type of middle ground, so that we don't get caught up in some type of major delay in proceeding with rebuilding 70 Mulberry Street. Because right now we're like, of course I would like to preserve as much as we can. However, like how much more time and cost are we talking about? Now, I feel that's a major deciding factor. I think that people should be informed on.
Sure. So time and cost considerations. Eva, do you want to speak?
Yeah, I completely agree with Dan. I think that it needs to be very transparent what the costs are on both sides. And it would have been great if the city had worked to get, an independent assessor to be able to give us this information even before the community weighed in, because you kind of need that in order to make a decision. I do know that Think Chinatown reached out to an architect, an independent architect, and he looked at you know, how much and how long it would take to either rebuild from what is existing right now to full demolition and rebuilds completely from scratch. And rebuilding completely from scratch actually takes longer than rebuilding from the actual working on the structure now, because the structure, as we saw, the HPD inspector said that the building was structurally sound. So given that, since that's the only thing that we know from the city at this point, then we know that, okay, if you build up and it's faster. I mean, I think that most of us want something built as quickly as possible because we care about the people who are in the building, as well as the community members, as well as the small business merchants on Baird Street and on Mulberry, who are being impacted by the fact that the building is a shell of what it used to be. In terms of the cost, from what I know from that architect, again, this is through Think Chinatown. I am not an architectural historian myself, but it does not cost more to build, to restore, like to to preserve and then build up. I also agree that this is an opportunity to envision the space in a different way than what already was. Certainly, I think Rocky mentioned this, an elevator would be wonderful, particularly for the seniors who use the building. I think that, and again, these acronyms, there's something called ULURP, Priyanka, what is that, ULURP? There's a process.
Yeah, if we go beyond as of rights, and as of rights mean if you're building, so I might be incorrect again, like I have architectural background, but I don't want to be the technical expert here. From my understanding, Chinatown does not have height restriction, but it has floor area ratio restriction.
Okay.
And which means that you're still limited to certain floors that you can build, and to be able to go beyond that number, right? So in somewhere from Think Chinatown, we heard today that you can, someone mentioned, right, the 3-story area above the 6th floor, if we set it back, we can still build in as of right. But if you go beyond as of right, it initiates a ULURP process. It means it has to be rezoned.
Okay.
And it has to be rezoned, then it goes through a long process, like there's a community meetings, it goes to the Community Board 3, which is the Community Board of Chinatown, and it initiates a different process.
Okay, so I would say that we probably wouldn't want to go into making anything longer into the ULURP process, but if we could stay within the zoning and build up, you know, potentially a couple of floors higher, that to stay within the zone, so that more space in the interior can be utilized for the different organizations that would use the space, I think that would be great.
Mm-hmm.
So it could potentially be taller than what it was, but not so tall that it would enact this major process that would take everything longer in terms of rebuilding.
Right. Dan, you raised your hand. Before I go to you, Dan, though, I would really encourage everyone else to speak up too. I don't want the conversation to be limited to 3 people. Please feel free to speak up. Dan?
No, I forgot to hit the, I didn't know I had to hit the hand, the lower hand part. But yeah, my main concern is hopefully we can all expedite the process so that all those community organizations that have been displaced by the fire can get back in there, hopefully way before 2030, because you know, I feel terribly for like the senior citizens that have lost a place to congregate to see their friends on a daily basis, and considering like and also the organizations that are in there, like the chant and dancers, where they lost their spaces to teach dance to all the young children. So like if this process ends up taking a few years, or until 2030, it's like another generation there that's gonna lose the opportunity to have that time and all the experiences like you can do inside of 70 Mulberry Street. But is there any type of timeline that we're talking about? I was told that due to the fact that we some people want to do a preservation, that it was extended for 90 days. Is there a further extension now, or
the 90
where
days,
are we on?
Right. The 90 days for the community visioning process, which is what we're going through, it will end in mid-December. And then depending upon what the programming ends up being and what's preserved, what's not, we're looking at a rebuilding process that might go anywhere between 2.5 to 3 years. It really, like, I cannot put a figure to it, of course. Like, there are various parameters that goes into it, but that's the scenario that's being circulating right now.
Well, 2.5 to 3 years.
Right now, I don't quote me.
So now, like, for instance, like, will people in the community have anything to fear about in terms of like funding for the project? I know funds are there allocated, but you know, looking at the situation now with the pandemic, the city's been hit hard. I've lost a lot of tax revenue from tourists and many of the other activities and conventions and stuff that happen in New York City. So, do people in the community have to worry about 70 Mulberry losing funding for the rebuild?
I would put that as a question. You have a lot of considerations and questions, really great questions.
I try. Thanks though. Was you know, other things I've heard in the past that we were supposed to get like a gateway into Chinatown, and I've heard about that concept and that movement ever since I was a young boy, and to this date I still don't see no gateway into the second most largest Chinatown in the good old USA. So that's why it's you know, for me I feel it's a little unnerving because the fact that you know, major issues are funding, and whichever direction we head, I just hope that funding is secured and that we can move forward.
Doris, Frank, Vera, would you want to speak?
Hi, this is Doris. Thanks, Priyanka, for asking. I don't have any questions right now.
But I know you just joined, right?
Correct.
Just to I'll put the question again. We are looking at different scenarios and dimensions. And with 70 Mulberry Street, whether it's preservation or full demolition, adaptive reuse or new space planning, or how many floors would you want it to be? What would your preference would be for the building height, or what would be your preference for the programming, if you want to speak to it?
Okay, sure. I'll go really quickly. I would like to keep the building at the same height that it was originally. I don't want it to go higher. That is my preference. But my question, Priyanka, is what is the accountability for the consultants hired in this process to listen to what the community wants? Because I noticed in the forms that were sent out to register people to join these meetings, that, you know, the meetings with the community members were first, and then subsequently came like property owners, business owners, and I don't even remember what that last one was, but it seems like, is this dictating an order of priority? I am just curious, you know, why the community members, which I think that meeting filled up the quickest, and, you know, we're just 15 people here right now. So, or maybe this is just breakout rooms and I missed the like the big Zoom, but I'm just wondering, like, what is the accountability to actually take in the community's desires and the things that we've communicated here, and if it's just wasting our time and this is just pretend? Priyanka, can you answer this question for us? Thank
Sure,
you.
Doris. This is a smaller breakout room. The rest of the people in our other rooms. So that's answer to one of the questions that you asked. The way we structured and the reason why we structured community and industry stakeholder groups first was really, to be honest, like, it was partly random, partly we wanted to make sure that sometimes residents and small business owners and property owners do feel intimidated when there are louder voices in the room. And so we do want to give them a safe space to be heard. I don't think it dictates priority. We are taking notes of everything that is being discussed in the meeting. We have second rounds of meeting where we would have a town hall meeting which is open to all public, where you can speak to the larger community, anyone and everyone. And we would have another workshop in November, again, where all different stakeholders can join. We would also be circulating a survey around, and we would also be sending a link through which people can submit their proposals, ideas, letters.
Okay, thank you so much for that response, Priyanka. I'm just wondering about the accountability piece. Like yes, thank you for listening to us and the community in these series of meetings, but I'm wondering, like, how is all these different opinions and point of views going to be then synthesized and made the decisions later? Like, I'm just curious, you know, like, how is it going to be that, like, how, like what opinions and what points of view are going to be really driving this now that, like, we're in the process of taking it all in? Like, I'm just wondering, like, how is that going to be synthesized? And, you know, the thing is, like, this whole process, I'm just really, I'm not understanding, like, how this is going to be, like, serving the community, because I get what you're saying, that business owners can feel intimidated to be in meetings with community members, but, you know, money talks, as we all know, and I don't think that they're intimidated, and I think that this is just, I don't know, that's my point of view, but thanks, Priyanka.
Doris, I think you did miss, so because you were not part of the larger presentation, you missed the earlier part of the presentation. We did talk about this. First of all, we are an independent consultant. We are not influenced by any of the stakeholders. We are listening to everyone and we giving them equal weight. Our role in this project is to listen, analyze it, present scenarios based on what we have listened, and then bring it back to the community in the second rounds of meetings. We are not giving any weight to any one, we're not giving more weight to any one stakeholder. That's not our role. Our role is just to hear what people are saying, synthesize it, see where people are meeting grounds, common grounds. That our real goal here is to develop a shared vision where most of the community can be aligned.
Thanks for that response, and I do apologize for missing the earlier part. I was, like, on the bus. I noticed there were recordings, so are the recordings for all of these meetings going to be freely shared with participants and anyone who asks for them? Thank you.
We are recording as much as we can, and what we are recording, we will share it. With DCAS, it's up to DCAS. Like, that is not a question that I can answer. But they did say that they will share it. Doris, I am happy to have this conversation outside the room. I do want to use the time in this room to go through these questions and would love to hear what your thoughts are regarding different programming needs and where do you think the building should be in terms of preservation, or full demolition, or space planning, or zoning, or programmatic needs?
Me specifically, I don't want to, I feel like I've already talked a lot, so I just want to make sure there's space for other participants to speak. So I'm gonna pause and let other participants speak. Thank you.
Thank you. Vera, Rocky.
Hi, yeah, this is Vera again. So back to after I've heard a lot of the other comments and thoughts, I'm back at one again still, and I would like to keep it within the existing envelope, zoning envelope, because the thought of a ULURP process I know would be could really drag things out for a long time. And along that note, I think preservation of the existing structure, as much as we can do to do that, would be my preference.
Anyone else? With that, then I would go to the next activity.
Priya, I'm so sorry. Can I cut in for a second?
Sure.
The last slide. It seemed like, can you go back to the last slide for a second? It looks like you only have 2 dots. However, so many more people spoke.
That's fine. We see this is more like a visualization activity. Okay. We're not going to count these dots. We want to hear. It's more for people to see what's being talked about. Okay. That's all. Yes. Like we are too small a group to be able to start counting dots. Okay. We just want to listen. Yes. So I would go to the next activity and want to hear, like, we already know that the mayor has promised that the original tenants would be brought back. So that programming and service will exist in the building. But as you all have mentioned before, there's a range of needs within the community that can also be answered through this building. So from your point of view, what needs exist within the community? And you can repeat from some of the answers that you spoke to before, and that you might see being addressed through the programming and service offerings at 70 Mulberry Street.
Well, some of the art, cultural facilities that were not represented by the tenants that were there. I know HT had a small theater, but it was only meant for small dance performances, and could not fit that many people. So I don't know, and I know when we were looking around for a building, Create was interested in creating a facility that would be have a performance space with enough for a larger audience. And we know that there were opera groups that wanted, more than 500 seats. The architectural consultants that we had there at that point in time were saying that I don't think we could, to run the building economically, we could not afford to have more than, I think, 100 or so seats. So that the size of a theater, not just the stage, there's all kinds of issues whether the stage is built for dance or built for performance or theater, drama, has all different kinds of stage requirements. The floor, whether it's for, resilient and flexible for dancing, all of those things have to fit into the limitations of the building itself. So I can't say what kind of theater ought to be in there. It has all these different factors involved. However, when you find out from the opera groups, from other groups of what they want, and then you understand the limitations of what is possible there. So it might be some kind of small theater, nothing much bigger than that, in what that term small might mean. But certainly there was lots of things that we wanted to do in Chinatown over the years. And in terms of the dance company that we had, there was no place in Chinatown to do it. So something that will enable Chinatown to be able to do things that it has not in the past been able to do would be important. I myself was into exhibiting artists. So we had another space on 26 Bowery. And so a space, and Think Chinatown itself had a huge, beautiful space for a pop-up for several months on Broadway. I don't think we could get a space that big, but certainly it has spoken about a gallery is needed in the Chinatown community, which was evidenced by how large of a crowd would come to their exhibitions when they had the pop-up on Broadway. So the community can use that. On the other hand, MoCA has a storage area there, and for these groups that are there and for Chinatown, it's very hard to operate a nonprofit if it doesn't have an area like storage or other kinds of facilities to back up, and it will impinge upon a gallery space or a theater space if there's no place to put things. I was also interested in a library, a room where there are some books. I have lots of art books that I really wanted kids in Chinatown to be able to give those books to them and for them to see. However, in canvassing all the libraries, or a lot of them in New York City, nobody's taking these things. They're all shipping them out to third world countries. So a lot of art books that are not possible to put into the libraries in and around New York City. I wish there was something like that. There may be other art disciplines that someone else might raise as would be a good offering to have in 70 Mulberry Street.
Say that again.
And there might be a group that's doing that. I mean, even just in terms of art classes and for children. We had an art class for many, many years. So this has to be something that's not only brought up because the community wants it, but because there is a group in Chinatown that actually focuses on that particular discipline and wants to come into this building and will prove to be a good tenant. So that, but this all depends upon how much space can be built within a limited amount of time, and then that space will give us some limitations to see how much we can afford to expand what is offered. So I don't think we should try to aim for putting everything in there in something much bigger that will delay the whole process. I think that a certain number of cultural facilities and disciplines will function for the community to draw public, to draw foot traffic, to continue the development of an Asian American consciousness that will, I think, increasingly become and play a very important part in how the idea of what Chinatown is, how that evolves within the United States, where it becomes more and more a place where not only Chinese is spoken, but English is spoken, and Chinatown becomes an integral part of the cultural life of New York City.
Doris?
Thanks, Robert, for that. Like, for those contributions, I think they're super important. I think that the needs that exist within the community that I see being addressed through the programming and services offered at 70 Mulberry is that building and those organizations are a meeting place for Asian diaspora across the city. As gentrification and displacement of so many Chinese residents and new immigrants who would have settled in Chinatown are priced out of Manhattan's Chinatown, these meeting points and places to congregate and build community become increasingly important as people can no longer live in the hub of Chinese and Asian communities. So I really think the value of what is provided in this building and these organizations cannot be overstated. And I will say that the history of these buildings and like the legacy of what they've brought to this community is like they have deep roots. And I really believe that should that space be delegated to groups, new groups, other groups, the groups paying the highest rent, we would lose a lot, to say it matter-of-factly. It's just, there's countless people that have been reached because of these groups who have come to Chinatown because their family lives there, because their like distant relatives live there, because of the other businesses that are in Chinatown. It's just one of the places that really brings people together in a way that like there are so few of those now, especially as the trend from people developing real estate in Soho is edging into Little Italy and Chinatown. And so we need to preserve this space to 100%. We cannot give an inch, in my opinion.
And then when you say delegated to new groups, we would lose. When you say new groups, who do you count as new groups?
I would say like prioritizing the space for the tenants that were already inhabiting the building makes the most sense to me, given the long-standing relationship those organizations had to the building and the community at large. When I say new, I mean, that's what I mean. Like the like if there were tenants that weren't there previously, I don't know. I don't want this space to become like a commercial offering that like, hey, this like artist wants like a loft for their new studio, and 70 Mulberry is like a nice address and it's cool in Chinatown now. Like that's what I was imagining. I don't know if that brings any clarity for you, Priyanka.
Definitely makes sense. Ava, do you want to go next?
Thank you. I do want to back up what the two previous speakers have said. And just to add that I would love to see a designated multidisciplinary cultural space there. And what I mean by that is a space that many different kinds of groups could use. So if it could be a theater space, right? We don't have a theater space. My family used a theater space in the early part of the 20th century on Doyer Street, right? Which is now a restaurant. So we don't have that kind of theater space. HT's space was good, but it was limited. It was smaller. A space that even folks that, if you were from CCBA, there's a theater space there, right? That my grandmother used to sing opera at when she was 16 in the 1930s. But something modern that anybody in the neighborhood could use. Perhaps a gallery space like Bob was talking about, where artists could use it. And also space maybe in the basement if it's possible, so that if you do have a theater group there, they can store their equipment. There are language classes that are being offered in Chinatown that sometimes don't have a space to utilize. So folks who want to offer free Toisanese classes, free Cantonese classes, so that the Juxing generation like me and our children can learn the various dialects and languages, of our family members and improve upon them, right? So some sort of space where languages and our various different diasporatic languages can be learned and practiced. I mean, obviously you can practice it on the streets of Chinatown, but to have a designated space where a teacher can use, because it is expensive in Chinatown, and it can be very difficult if somebody's offering free classes. They don't have the money to pay an institution for the space. So if we had some sort of nonprofit space that was multidisciplinary and cultural like that, I think that would be a really wonderful thing and to add to the fabric of the neighborhood. And I agree that the nonprofits that are already there need to be supported. But I do think that it might be possible, if it's possible to have others come in, newer nonprofits that are interested and need a space in the heart of Chinatown, it would be great if they could be accommodated too.
Anyone else? Dan?
Can I mention something?
Sure.
When we were considering, when CREATE was considering many years ago a facility, we found that a theater, for example, where we would like to continue performing, have the space become known as a performing arts space. I forgot who mentioned that. It may be that there is no theater group in that wants to come and become part of this building. Instead, you might want to create a theater where there are administrators or people who run the theater, but then are not themselves a performing group or an Asian American performing group. They could take and be to administrate such a thing, which would take a full-time person at least, if not more, to run the theater, to run the lights, to set the scheduling, set the rehearsals time. That takes a certain faculty, but they would run that space, particularly from a community point of view, so it doesn't become commercial. That has to be somehow written in to the structure of how the theater works. Could not be rented out to a commercial kind of entity, more for an Asian American, from within the Asian American community would be important. But the other thing is that someone, you know, the mention of Chinatown history, yes, that's important. That part of the essential framework of what we're talking about. However, I do want to mention that has been so many discussions and other things like that where people from Filipino background, other backgrounds, so many different other Asian, South Asian, Central Asian groups that are in the city and depend upon the Chinatown area to buy their groceries, to buy their particular kinds of items. They are very dependent upon this Chinatown for their aspect. And to recognize that Chinatown is not just Chinese. In New York City, we are Asian. That's why I prefer the term Asian American. And we need to, I would think one of the things that I didn't mention is that we need to promote this building as something that welcomes all the different people who identify with an aspect of what it means to be Asian in the middle of this Western capital, cultural capital. And that's Chinatown attracts so many different people. Mm-hmm. And that may be an area of, that is key to the growth of how this part of New York City will continue to thrive. Mm-hmm. So I don't, you know, there needs to be something. I'm not sure what that is, but something that enables other Asian groups to feel welcome, to be able to do their cultural thing, mm-hmm. And that Chinatown itself begins to recognize people who are their allies, their friends, mm-hmm. their assets for not only our economic benefit, but for who we identify with, how the Asian cultural consciousness evolves.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Could I just add a few words?
Sure, Rocky.
We could have a whole class and seminar from Bob Lee, but it's been fascinating, you know, so it's just lovely to hear Ava's story about her family. I would like to just throw out two things that are just kind of pretty obvious, but just I was thinking, one is, you know, we're fortunate in one way that this is a building that was owned by the city. Mm-hmm. You know, obviously we're in a really terrible financial situation, but I just think, you know, on the other hand, you know, it could be worse, right? It could be owned by some private developer who wants to just do whatever. So I think, you know, we all take that into account. We're going into a election year, and, you know, we need to make our voices heard. The other thing is the location of the building. You know, people are talking about, and I work with, obviously, Bob on Create in terms of the issue about the size of a theater. So on the one hand, I really would like to see a theater in there, but it seems to me that there are also some other things to think about, especially since we build buildings for long term. So one of them is, what have we learned during this pandemic? We've learned about Zoom, we've learned about digital communication, and it seems to me that there may be some out of the box thinking that needs to go on. And I'm just kind of thinking right now that, you know, if you had a theater or even a multi-purpose room in this building that could only accommodate 100 or 150 or whatever, you know, not small, but you had an event that really would be wanting, you know, something that would attract more people. Well, maybe there's a way to telecommunicate that, or to a larger audience, but you have to think about that in terms of just, you know, electronic, whatever. The other thing is we have a building that's adjacent to a really precious park, a park that has actually a theater space, or you could argue the pavilion is not a theater space, but it certainly has a you know, elevated level. And you clearly could put out in good weather several hundred seats out in front of that pavilion, yet that pavilion is, I think it's landmark, but in any event, it's fairly, you know, who knows what's going to happen. It's not necessarily maintained in the way that it could be maintained. There's even, like, I think a lift inside that is not working, right? Ava, isn't there a lift or something inside? Anyway, but my point is, you know, in developing this building that we've talked about, we might want to think about the neighborhood that we're in. And that neighborhood does include the park. It includes some streets that we know at maybe for certain kind of events could be closed. And so I think, you know, it's not a bad idea to have some parallel thinking in terms of the significance of the building internally, but also maybe when you're talking about design, you know, maybe there is some, and activities, you know, maybe there's some things to think about in terms of the immediate neighborhood that might be, you know, might enhance the presence of what goes on in that building. Anything from, you know, video screens or something like that. I'm, you know, just thinking, you know, that could kind of like connect things together. So I just want to throw that out. Otherwise, I don't have any. I mean, I'm very fond of HT Chen, and I think, you know, they've done such a great job of being stewards of that site. And I think they really, in terms of a cultural group, really deserve some recognition of that. So it's my 2 cents.
Thank you. Dan? Vera?
Yeah, I can't add anything more than what everyone else has said because I just agree with everything and all that was said. Sorry.
You disagree?
No, because I agree with what everyone has said.
You agree with everything?
Yes.
All right. All
completely.
Right. All right. And am I missing anyone else? No? All right. With that, I do want to wrap up this meeting and just remind you there's going to be another town hall meeting. We'll be sending the outreach for that. We'll start outreach for that next week. There would also be another workshop in early November. We will be disseminating a survey as well, which we hope we are able to get feedback from a much larger community, and that it is able to address some of the gaps, people not being able to attend the meetings or some conflicts in their schedule and else. We look forward to have you join us for the second round of meetings. Dan, you raised your hand. You want to say?
Oh, yeah. When you said about disseminating that survey, I'm going to presume that that's going to be a survey for everyone within the 5-block zone of 70 Mulberry Street.
It's open to all public, but we would be asking questions through which we can understand if it's like what's the affiliation of the person who's answering, whether they are in Chinatown, whether they are Asian American community or not. So there would be certain considerations, but it's open to all public.
It's open to all public. Okay. So now, with one other question is, like, in terms of all the considerations that you are giving in order to make a recommendation for the direction of 70 Mulberry Street, is there any type of priority setting for, like, the groups that are inside of were displaced in 70 Mulberry Street, or is it just equally? There's no preference. It's totally impartial process, or I was just curious in terms of like how that works.
There are only two commitments that have been made. The amount of money that has been put for the rebuilding effort and the
Okay.
promise that the tenants would be brought back to the building. Besides that, everything is open. And it really
Okay.
depends on where the communities align during these community meetings, and no one has more weight than someone else.
Okay. So like, are you able, I never heard the exact number in terms of how much money was actually allocated for the rebuild of 70 Mulberry Street.
It's 80 million.
18 million?
Yeah. So
Okay.
80 million funding to rebuild the 70 Mulberry Street, and the promise that all previous tenants will be returned to their previous business.
Okay. Now,
So those are the only two promises.
now, like what we discussed before, like about getting some type of a study to figure out the costs for going in either direction of 70 Mulberry Street. Will the city hire an architect to provide those numbers, or to do some type of assessment to get those numbers, or?
Definitely. I mean, I don't know if they would hire an architect or a team of engineers, architects, like those technicalities I cannot tell you. But once the community visioning process is over, based on where the community is aligned, there are different recommendations that we would make and different scenarios that would be circulated, and they would probably do a comparison study. But that's a question I can note down, and that's for DCAS to answer as well.
Yeah, because I think that it enables everyone to maybe get to a quicker consensus if we understand the costs that is involved with either direction that everyone in the community decides to vote on or choose. So like, because like if we make a decision in terms of which way we're headed, and then we find out that the costs are so prohibitive in terms of going in either direction, that, you know, it would, I just feel like it's more of a functional idea to actually know what's the cost and the timeline that is involved with either preservation or a full rebuild.
Definitely, but I will bring you back to this diagram. It's also important to sometimes take a step back from very pragmatic concerns and really go deep into what exactly is the need, aspiration, and values that we want to assign to this rebuilding process. And I think the first rounds of meetings are really focusing on going broad, diverging, understanding where different people are and where common grounds are, and then bring it to pragmatic concerns and have them as you can see them as little weights, different weights, right? So cost is one consideration, time is one consideration, but I think right now what we're really trying to understand is, if there is an ideal state scenario, where does community come together?
Okay. I do love the idea of theater, or like to have a theater for Chinatown, because Chinatown definitely needs a theater. If we're able to get more parking in Chinatown, I would love that idea too, because you know, when Chinatown gets busy on the weekend, there's never sufficient parking for all the tourists, visitors, or even locals that live in the neighborhood. So, I mean, hopefully we can address all the issues and move forward with the rebuild.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
We hope to see you again in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. Have a good night,
Bye.
everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye. Night.
Thanks, Priyanka.
Thank you. Thank you, Eva.